2nd January 2024.
I remember while I was in prayer still, my eyes saw Russia, the nation of Russia. And from what I was seeing, I began to see an influx of a Western influence within. I'm not talking about from without. Actually, from what I saw the plans. I sat where they were seated, and they were in discussion of how they would begin to prop up some kind of insurrection from the West, but from within. Because from what they were talking, there's a lady whom they had identified first from what one was reporting to another. And then they were in these talks about the funding and about all those things and about how it will bring turmoil, and they discussed the Russian leader's illness. They discussed all those things. But then their main thing was to create some kind of insurrection from within. So this is what you will see. You will begin to see a huge, and this looks like strange, because Russia is the nation that looks like it is hardcore and nothing can, rise up from within. But you will see it. You will see a huge pro-West uprising, pro-American uprising right within, almost too hard, and there will be a lot too hard to contain. And there will be a lot of hits and scandals as a result of trying to put it out, and then all this noise and all this. I want to pray for that leader. This year, something that he survived, I feel it so strongly on this year. And I will do that away from here. Hallelujah.
1 month and 15 days later, in an astonishing fulfillment of prophecy, global media was aflame with reports of the untimely death of Alexei Navalny, a Russian opposition leader and activist, which sparked protests and threatened insurgency and unrest in the nation of Russia, and also fueled anti-Russian rhetoric in the West that aimed at inciting global popular opinion against Russia.
There will be, a lot of hits and scandals as a result of trying to put it out, and then all this noise and
The mounting protests in Russia over the death in prison of opposition leader Alexei Navalny.
His supporters continue to bravely defy authorities. An independent Russian human rights group says more than 400 people have been arrested over the last couple of days, but Navalny's supporters say they won't give up.
For those wanting to publicly mourn Alexei Navalny's death, this was the response. Dozens were arrested in at least 21 cities across Russia. In Moscow, police formed a human chain to stop mourners attempting to rally at the so-called Wall of Sorrow, the monument for Joseph Stalin's victims of political persecution.
I saw the plans. I sat where they were seated, and they were in discussion of how they would begin to prop up some kind of insurrection from the West, but from within.
Я хочу, чтобы Путин.
Whatever story they tell, let us be clear, Russia is responsible.
We should hold Putin accountable for this.
Russia's responsible for this?
Make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible. Leaders and campaigners around the world are blaming the reported death of Russia's most prominent opposition figure on President Vladimir Putin.
The prophecy revealed that the main aim would be for Western leaders to create some kind of insurrection from within. And in a powerful display of the power of this prophecy, Navalny's widow, the US, and other major NATO allies were not only quick to blame the Russian government for his death, despite the scanty information and overwhelming uncertainty surrounding his death, but have also used this opportunity to call for new and sterner sanctions against Russia and a spectacular fulfillment to the prophecy.
We begin with the fallout from the death of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. His widow, Yulia, has been meeting today with European Union officials in Brussels. The bloc's Foreign Affairs Council invited her as they discussed further sanctions against Russia.
Yes, member state will propose sanctions, for sure, against the responsible. Well, the great responsible is Putin himself.
Other ministers said Mr. Navalny's death underlined the wider threat posed by Russia in Ukraine. EU ministers are keen to support the political opposition in Russia and honor Mr. Navalny's memory.
President Biden warned today that Russia is about to pay the price in the form of major sanctions for the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The White House says the sanctions will be announced Friday, right before the world marks 2 years since the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The US has come forward and said, we're going to hit Russia with further sanctions because of what happened to Alexei Navalny. What do we know about this part of the story?
We know the US has been looking at yet another package of sanctions to try and hit various aspects of the Russian economy. The idea has been to squeeze Vladimir Putin so that he draws back. In particular, they probably amped that up a bit in the aftermath of the death of Alexei Navalny. They're tying it to his death, obviously, also saying they need to punish Russia, people inside Russia, he said the establishment inside Russia for these events.
Some kind of insurrection from the West, but from within. There's a lady whom they had identified first from what one was reporting to another. And then they were in these talks about the funding and about all those things and about how it will bring turmoil, and they discussed the Russian leader's illness. They discussed all those things. But then their main thing was to create some kind of insurrection from within.
Алексея Путин убил половину меня, половину моего сердца.
She has to keep going, meeting EU officials, making speeches. Not despite the fact that she believes that her husband, Alexei Navalny, was murdered by Vladimir Putin.
Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, has accused Vladimir Putin of killing her husband and vowed to continue his work.
She called on supporters to resist Vladimir Putin and fight for what she called a free Russia. But voicing opposition in Russia can be dangerous. Yulia Navalnaya has meanwhile taken her message to the European Union. She's told officials there that they need to increase their sanctions on the Russian government. But she's also been urging them to give greater support to those in Russia who oppose the government of Vladimir Putin.
The Kremlin called Navalnaya's words unsubstantiated, obnoxious accusations. Western leaders have joined her in blaming Putin, the US ready to respond.
I told you we'd be announcing sanctions on Russia.
And the U.S. is expected to announce new sanctions on Russia Friday over the death of Alexei Navalny.
Russia is a nation that looks like it is hardcore and nothing can, rise up from within. But you will see it. You will see a huge pro-West uprising, pro-American uprising, right within, almost too hard. And there will be a lot too hard to contain.
The forensic medical investigation is not over yet. The exact cause of the death was not yet disclosed, while our Western colleagues rushed to claim 15 minutes after it happened, after the news were published, that this was the responsibility of the Putin's regime, etc., etc.
And earlier, my colleague Sami Zaidan spoke to Sergei Markov. He's a former advisor to the Russian president. He said that Navalny's pro-American stance cost him his popularity among the Russian people. To Daniel Hawkins, who's joining us from Moscow. So what are authorities saying about this, Daniel?
Well, the reaction from authorities, of course, very different to the emotions and the response we're seeing from opposition activists and Navalny's supporters. Key figureheads within the Russian government have dismissed these allegations of state involvement in Navalny's death as essentially fake news, with some, like Vyacheslav Volodin, a parliamentary speaker, going as far as to blame Western states, blame NATO for this, saying it's their actions that have led to the events we saw today. Maria Zakharova, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, saying that the very quick response of critics and Western officials is very telling, no doubt hinting there that at Navalny's backing and support by Western financiers.
So, given the fact that Mr. Navalny was previously hospitalized in 2020 for Novichok poisoning, do you think this will increase some suspicion, further suspicion, about whether he was targeted?
No, on contrary. For Russian authorities, the death of Alexei Navalny very disadvantageous, very much, because now we will have only 1 month before the presidential elections, on which Vladimir Putin more probably will win in great popular support. So this is bad news for Russian authorities. Also, Alexei Navalny, as you understand, had no political activity, had no political support inside Russia. So his death even created some, not big, but some problems for Russian authorities.
American politicians and the media is mourning the death of racist and xenophobe Alexei Navalny as a hero and a victim of Vladimir Putin and his regime. Now, they're doing this to sell you a war with Russia, but if you look into who this guy truly is and how little we know about what happened to him, you will not accept this as a reason for any war. Now, Alexei Navalny died in prison today after reportedly suffering from a blood clot. President Biden used the occasion for a live press conference in rare form. Every politician is ringing in with outrage, saying this shows that Putin is a madman, Russia is evil. Oh, but he was a political prisoner, the West says. He was poisoned by the Russians. He was Putin's biggest threat. None of this is true. I'm going to tell you what we do know about Alexei Navalny before he became this media darling, because it was easy to use it as a hit to Russia and Putin.
We render unequivocal reverence, celebration, and double honor to the unparalleled prophet to the nations, Prophet Elvis Mbonye.